Welcome to Discograffiti, the deep dive podcast for music obsessives that gives freaks like you and me the chance to connect with a brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebroe, and with 3 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Spirit, Psst, along with our special guest, band biographer Ryan Gabrinetti. This is part 6, covering the beginning of Spirit's Mercury Records era, a fertile period rife with creativity as Randy California wound up processing his feelings around America's Bicentennial through a surprisingly emotional internal filter, recording so much material for this double set that there was enough left over for a whole other record to come. Here are just a few of the many things that Ryan discusses with Discograffiti in this podcast. Randy's attempt to become a regular guy, including his stint working at a McDonald's before disappearing into thin air. Randy's move to Hawaii and some legitimately wild tales regarding his time there. How 10 years after backing out of a Florida gig wound up changing the trajectory of Randy's career. Reconciling the twin notions of recording an ambitious double set, but gracing it with an album cover drawn haphazardly upon a napkin, and an in-depth deep dive on every song off Spirit's Spirit of 76. And away we go then! Talk to me about moving to Molokai in Hawaii after Epic rejected the completed Potato Land. What happened to Randy?
Yeah, so I mean, the timeline here is so interesting because, like, you have the rejection of the tapes. They took the tapes with them on this tour of England when they were, going to Spirit. They didn't have, all the things that you described, that Fuzzy experienced. Randy just increasingly erratic, just dropping lots of acid. And Cass basically got him a plane ticket back and, was just like, good luck, have a good one. So he was, back in LA, was in rehab for a little bit, still doing weird stuff. I mean, there are just some really interesting stories about him from that period. But sort of one day he, actually, before I mentioned this, he kind of tried to be a regular guy for a bit. He got some regular, he got an apartment out in the valley and he worked at McDonald's for a little while. He was flipping burgers. Yeah. He was really trying to just get back to
What
normal.
year is this?
This had been end of 72, 73, somewhere in there. The timeline again is a little bit hazy here, but basically one day he just disappeared. And his mom freaked out. It's just, family, everybody freaked out. And it turns out that he had in storage, he had a Porsche 911 that he had bought with some of his label money way back in the day. And he had sold the Porsche and bought a one-way ticket to Molokai. And it wasn't for, I think, a few weeks or months before he told anybody where he was. And during that time, he was he was working in coal fields. He was a pineapple picker. He was living in a tent. And I think as a result of one of these jobs, he developed a gangrene infection in his leg.
Jesus.
And they were going to get very close to amputating it. And the story goes, or the story that was related was that, so Molokai is, it's the most remote island in Hawaii. And historically, it has a leper colony there. That's where they sent all the lepers. And so there's always been this, lots of priests and religious figures that are there. And so he was in the hospital with gangrene in his leg and they were this close to amputating it. And some priest prayed over his leg and the next day it got better. And that was when he sent a telegram back to Dottie Ross, to his management, to let everybody know where he was.
Also, it should be mentioned, during this time, Epic decided to reissue the group's first and third albums as a twofer called Spirit in response to Sardonicus continuing to sell well as a catalog item, and the Best of Spirit came out. So, yeah, which is basically two things. That basically says people are maybe gaining interest in Spirit, but also the record company is deciding that this guy's done.
Yeah, well, Sardonicus just had this crazy cult thing happen with it over just a long period of time. I mean, like I said, it went gold in 1976. 76. It was like still selling, units for all this time. And like when all that stuff, the reissuing the catalog and all that, like I doubt Randy was involved with that at all. I think he was probably in the middle of, he might have even very well been gone in Hawaii by then.
Well, Cass decided to capitalize on the new demand for the group. He put together an entirely new group for touring, which lasted, I think, through 73.
Yeah, they did. They went to like Australia and stuff. They did. I mean, Copycat Spirit. It's like
right. Except it was cast derived, so it wasn't put together by a manager or something. It's the Ed Crassity period.
Well, it's like the conversation comes up a lot of like, why didn't they end Spirit? Like, why didn't Randy just be Randy, and why couldn't they have just gone on and whatever? And like Jay even said later that if they had just laid Spirit to bed,
he would have come back.
Yeah. And like maybe they did some things for a while, because like I'm sure there were a few instances of this. Whenever the five guys originally came back, whenever they got back together and hung out and played and stuff, it was like, oh shit, there it is.
Dude, I honestly didn't think, in listening to everything, the legacy tarnishing stuff only begins in the mid 80s.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, it's such a rough period for any of that generation of artists. Like,
no, but he made it through the first half of the 80s fully aesthetically intact. And
like, in the other thing that's crazy too is that like he was like 30. He wasn't like an old guy.
Right.
He was like still like a young man. I'm 31, and I'm like thinking like, damn, if I was like in my third act right now, like that's crazy,
right. Yeah.
And it probably was really maddening too for him. He was always the youngest guy in the room, and so like not quite relating to these older people, and then you don't get to relate to people your own age. It's a weird kind of in between.
So then in 1974, Cass made it a point to find and reestablish contact with his stepson. And then he persuaded Randy to come back to the mainland and give the band another shot. Mark Andes worked with them for a little bit, but never intended to stay because he was in the process of forming Firefall at the same time. And you got to go where the fucking money is. And so Mark was replaced by Barry Keane, who was Frank Zappa's former sound engineer. In early 75, the group was scheduled to open for 10 years after at a show in Florida. But when 10 years after backed out at the last minute, Spirit was granted permission to take over the theater for the evening. And after going around to local radio stations to promote the show and setting a low $3 ticket price, Spirit managed to sell out the 3,000-seat theater. And then using the profits from the show, they blocked out as much time as they could at Studio 70 in Tampa, Florida, which those were the sessions then that begat Spirit of 76 and Son of Spirit, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting how they kind of got that back on the wagon, right? Because like Randy was out in Hawaii for almost
So tell me then. So Spirit of 76 and Son of Spirit, all that material, was Randy just accruing material in Hawaii?
That's my guess. Yeah, I think so, because it's the only way to explain the sprawl of those two records.
Because it is an actual sprawl, and it's a guy with so much to say.
Yeah, I mean, it really, in heart, it's a triple album.
It is.
Like Son of Spirit is like the third record.
It is.
The Hawaii period, he was like, fuck music. Like, I just want to start over.
And I hear a guy with a totally different outlook who, it doesn't even sound like the Potato Land guy.
No, not even close. No, you're right.
All right. That concludes your free sneak peek into today's bonus episode. If you want to hear the rest of it, just visit patreon.com/discograffiti and either purchase this podcast by itself for $4, or better yet, subscribe at the major tier and get access to Discograffiti's 3 weekly episodes. That's Friday's main episode, the Sunday Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. That's our podcast within a podcast featuring Patreon members as guests, and your Tuesday bonus episode. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and 7-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not supporting Discograffiti. Become a member so you don't miss a single thing at patreon.com/discograffiti.